Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. We don't have the cool little intro that we normally have because we are experimenting with something today, and it's me doing a solo appearance here on the live stream. Hope that you find it interesting. You know, I think everybody knows that the kind of the news about Supreme Court Justice Breyer announcing his retirement has kind of sucked the air out of the room in terms of all the news in Washington, D.C. Just 2 days ago, we were breathlessly being warned by everybody in the White House about pending potential nuclear disaster in Ukraine and all that kind of stuff. And a Supreme Court justice decides he's not going to continue past June. And suddenly, Ukraine's not in the news. What we're talking about is the Supreme Court justice, which is, I think it says a lot about perhaps why that announcement was made when it was made. But it is an important subject. It's an important subject because Supreme Court justices have not just a 2-year or 4-year impact, they've got 30-year impacts. And the decisions they make, the decisions they influence, have impacts for the entire lifetime of the United States, because the legal system is based on a principle called stare decisis. Stare decisis essentially is that precedents, you build law over precedents. So what a previous court decided is generally the platform that you build decisions off of. And the left has been very good at saying, well, we don't care what the precedent is. We want to do what we want to do. And jurists on the right tend to sit there and say, well, we don't want to break precedent all that much. So we'll try to build off of, do whatever we do in terms of a case, but we're going to justify it based upon the recent precedents that exist, which essentially has the effect of, if you have 100 years of bad precedent, what it does is you can't fix anything if you don't go take a axe to the root of the tree, which is the original bad precedent that a whole bunch of bad law was created off of. And truthfully, any future appointee by a Republican jurist by a Republican president needs to be subjected to the scrutiny. Are they willing to take the axe to the root of the tree? Because unless you're willing to tear down decades of bad precedent that's been imposed by left-leaning courts, you never are able to get us back to truly constitutional government. But having said that, that's not the choice we're going to have today. We're going to have, Joe Biden has said he is going to appoint, he's guaranteed he's going to appoint a black female to be on the Supreme Court. It's kind of a box that he's put himself in that limits his choices. There are obviously a lot of black females who are qualified. And so we'll see what he ends up coming up with and who he ends up coming up with. But the one thing you can take to the bank is this is about Joe Biden is going to be using this nomination to try to incite the Democrat base on the left, because this is the one thing that he's hoping that will ignite them to fight and get them excited for the 2022 election. And so the timing of this is going to run us right into the 2022 election. If you remember, Kavanaugh, in his hearing, he was appointed in July 9 or so. They had first hearings in early September, and you ended up with a massive fight for the whole month of September. He finally got confirmed, I think, and on the court around the 12th of October. So he missed about a week of hearing cases because he hadn't been fully confirmed, and it takes a few days for the paperwork to get done and things like that. So that's, that would normally be what you would expect to occur with this nomination. Given the fact that Joe Biden is saying, I'm going to let everybody know who I want in February, and who's going to be the nominee, even if they aren't formally nominated, because there's already somebody still in the Supreme Court seat, Justice Breyer. Even if they're not formally nominated, a lot of the vetting process, a lot of the review of their record will be done in the subsequent intervening 4 or 5 months. So you can expect in July a very fast, you'll have a judiciary committee fight over the nominee. You can expect, and I'll tell you why that matters and what the possibilities are there. And then you can expect that Majority Leader Chuck Schumer will do everything he can to bring the nomination to the floor, and at the latest early September. And that he's going to do that because he wants a fight over and work up his base. He wants to get people worked up and do all that. And so he'll do that over the summer. And so you'll see early to mid-September confirmation if they follow a timeline that most people anticipate they'll follow. So that's kind of the process. And so now let's look at, and I'm going to try to just walk through a couple different pieces here. So now let's look at kind of what the impact will be. The impact is very simple. Justice Stephen Breyer was on the court for more than 2 decades. He served on the court for a very long time. He had relationships with everybody on the court. He had long-term relationships with many of the conservative court members, including Chief Justice Roberts. Breyer, because of those relationships, and remember, almost every communication for it to be successful has to be based upon mutual trust and a relationship. Otherwise, people don't listen to you, no matter how rational your argument. These guys sit and work together for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. No matter what happens in terms of their decisions and how they might disagree, many of them are personal friends. They sit around, they talk about stuff, they disagree. One side wins, one side loses. But ultimately, this is their work environment. This is where their clerks work. This is where all the people work at the Supreme Court. It's a tight family. So what you have is, because Breyer had all those years, he's got built up relationships with Chief Justice Roberts and others that has allowed him to sway Roberts on some very important decisions, because Chief Justice Roberts, for better or worse, really does not want his court to be known as being a court that was taking an axe to the tree and making it so we were restoring liberty and breaking down a lot of the bad precedents. That's been the historical pattern. There's been some differentiation. The Heller decision on guns was a great decision, and that broke precedent. So there are some examples of breaking precedent, some really good examples of breaking precedent. But we've seen a lot of other examples where this court has been reluctant to go where perhaps you would expect a 6-3 Republican appointed majority would go. And and part of that is because Stephen Breyer has a good relationship with a lot of the people on the right. And he is a guy who has a high intellect. People respect him. And so he was able to get the ear of Justice Roberts and others, Chief Justice Roberts and others, and make a case and sometimes convince Roberts and Kavanaugh or others to join his side in an argument, and win the day when the numbers would have dictated that the left should never have won. So the net effect, in my estimation, is they lose that. The left loses that. There's nobody on the court right now who matches Breyer in his intellect and intensity. And so the left is left with very competent jurists, but not necessarily people who can sway the other people on the other side, bring votes to their side in terms of a decision. So that's what they lose. No matter who gets appointed by Biden, no matter who gets confirmed by the Senate, that person will be starting new. They won't know the lay of the land. They won't be able to exert the same kind of influence. And so that is an extremely important change in terms of the ability of the left to kind of shape opinions, because quite honestly, Breyer was expert at that. He was very good, and he's a very affable guy. He's very smart. People like him. And I hate to tell people, but ultimately a lot of this stuff is based on who likes who and who you're willing to listen to, because, I like this guy, I don't like that person. It's so much of things that happen in Washington, D.C. are like going back to, grade school, based on who liked who, or maybe middle school, who liked who and who dated Johnny and who didn't date Johnny and who Johnny thought he was dating and all that garbage. Well, personalities are personalities. Everybody's human. We want to put them in robes and say they're gods. They're not. They're human. And so, if you like somebody, you're much more likely to kind of listen to their arguments and give it real thought. If you don't like somebody, or if they're abrasive, you sit there and you say you may discard that thought as not being as valid, and aren't as willing to be swayed by it. So BREYER was expert at that. And as a result, the left really is losing somebody who they need in an environment where it's 6-3 Republican appointee over Democrat appointee. And so from my perspective, this is good news, because he's not replaceable from that perspective. And that is good news, because we should hopefully see more conservative opinions, more willingness to break ground in terms of breaking down bad precedents and begin to move the interpretation of the Constitution to a more fundamentally sound basis, rather than what we wish it said without having to go through the trouble of amending it. So I think that's good news. And so people should not look at BREYER retiring in any way but being good. The Democrats wanted him to retire because Ruth Bader Ginsburg didn't. And because she didn't, she lived into the Trump term, and then she passed away and Donald Trump got to pick a replacement. So the Democrats, that's their nightmare scenario with Stephen BREYER, who's in his 80s, would be that he lives into 2025 with a Republican president, and a Republican president picks his replacement. So they desperately needed him to retire earlier. They also needed him to retire while they held at least nominal control of the Senate, with the 51st vote being provided by the vice president. Because in order to invoke the nuclear option and not have to go to 60 votes for a Supreme Court nominee to be confirmed, they need to be able to get 51 votes. And right now they have 50 senators, the Republicans have 50 senators, and they have to break the tie with the vice president. And so ultimately that's the real life scenario. If Mitch McConnell or a Republican becomes majority leader of the Senate in 2023, then they don't have that advantage. And at that point, they would be forced to really deal with trying to come up with a nominee who would be acceptable to the Republicans, which would not mean they'd be a conservative nominee. It just means they'd be less radical. Right now, they're in position to put the most radical nominee they want on the bench if we don't stand up and take a stand and do a couple of things. What can we do about it? What can we do? People say, well, what can we do about it? They got 50, they can do what they want to do. Well, there is a theory, there is an idea that there's an agreement between Majority Leader Schumer and Mitch McConnell at the beginning of this year gives some glimmer of hope for Republicans and that on this situation, because the ability to invoke the nuclear option only exists, according to what's being talked about, only exists if the Judiciary Committee, the Senate Judiciary Committee, reports the nominee out. And the Senate Judiciary Committee has 9 Republicans on it, 9 Democrats on it. So effectively, if that's the way the rules are written, and I've read it, I've had other people talk about it, but I can't confirm personally that that's true. But if that is the way the rules are written, then this nominee will come down to 9 Republican members in the Senate Judiciary Committee, who will have to determine whether or not they're going to let the person go to the floor. Are they going to just not vote and say, so he goes to the floor, she goes to the floor by a 9-8 vote? Those are going to be real considerations. And so the pressure points on the Republican side are going to be on those Judiciary Committee members and people like Lindsey Graham, who has really been very upfront that he believes the president should get the judges that the president asks for. And so will he allow a radical judge that's really would be a slap in the face to jurisprudence, assuming that's the direction Biden goes? Will he allow that kind of radical judge to get a free pass to go onto the court with a 50-50 vote in the Senate and the Senate Judiciary Committee waiving their responsibility? And so those will be, so Lindsey Graham will be important. A Ben Sass from Nebraska will be important. John Cornyn from Texas will be important. So there's some key members on the Senate Judiciary Committee who are Republicans who, we're going to spend some time focusing on over the next 5 months. And it's going to be a focus which is very sharp. We're going to make the point, Americans for Limited Government will be making the point about any kind of, if this is a radical nominee, we're going to let you know and why they're a radical nominee, not just because they're appointed by Biden. That's not good enough. If they are somebody who has a history of being really doing or acting in a way that would give you great pause about their ability to be an honest jurist, then we're gonna bring that to your attention, and we're urge you to contact your senators about it, and we will not be restricting it to Democrats. A lot of people believe that the entirety of this lies in the hands of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. I will tell you, I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that Joe Manchin, unless somebody is a radical person who wants to eliminate the coal industry and the natural gas industry, and they've been on record doing that. At that point, he may have some problems with it. But if this nominee can be bad on all the social issues, can be bad on virtually everything, but doesn't really have a record on energy or environment, Joe Manchin he's a Democrat. If he doesn't vote for this nominee, he will be thrown out of the party. I mean, it's at some point, for all intents and purposes, he will have to vote for this nominee. So I don't think that that's a pressure point. We may have to do some stuff there, but the truth be told, that's kind of a long shot. The way this will work is by taking a look at an individual jurist record, and if that jurist record directly contradicts the interests of various states represented by Democrats, is to make a very pointed case in those Democrat states that a vote for this member of the Supreme Court is a vote for whatever policy they represent that is antithetical to the economic interests of that state. How many jobs would be lost? Those kind of arguments that really hit home and cause a senator to think twice, because it has real in their lap for their neighbors, for their constituents. It creates real problems for them, and personalizing it that way by state interest is the way you will be able to fight in any state any nominee. Key is we fully anticipate this will be one of the most radical nominees, if not the most radical nominee in history. We also have reason to expect that there will be a real scrutiny on the qualifications of this nominee, and the Republicans will fight if a fight is needed, if the person is that radical. And if the Republicans don't fight, then that would create an environment where they would be getting a negative, while the Democrats would get a big boost in terms of voter turnout, in terms of voter enthusiasm. And voters on both sides want the people who are representing them to fight, and not to just go along to get along. They want people to fight for freedom. And so the Republicans will be expected to fight. It'll be you encouraging them to do so that will make a difference to try to do that. And so that's where we are. A radical can be stopped. I've given you some of the ways they can be stopped. But first and foremost, you have to stop either the person coming out of committee, so at which point the Democrats would need 60 votes, which means they need to pick up 10 Republicans, or you have to get a Democrat opposition to the nominee, and that Democrat opposition, you're going to get it based on radical policies that the person supports that are antithetical to the interests of the states that those senators represent. And just wrap it around their neck. So while it'd be a positive in terms of enthusiasm for Democrats around the country, if it's a negative for a Democrat in Nevada, say, then the senator from Nevada who's up for election would have a really hard way to go, because she'd have to decide, do I want to lose my Senate seat over confirming this justice. And that's a very, I don't know many senators are willing to lose their Senate seat over confirming a justice. So that's where it's going to come down. Until we know the person's picked, we can't really make much of a judgment about where they're going to come down. What we do know is Joe Biden in 2020, unlike President Trump in 2016, refused to give a list of names of people he would nominate. And he refused to do so because he said he didn't want them to be under intense scrutiny. So rest assured, the last thing Joe Biden wants is intense scrutiny for whoever he picks. And it's up to us to engage in that intense scrutiny and make certain you're informed about what's going on and given the tools to do something about it. That's what we do here at Americans for Limited Government. That's what we are trying to accomplish, and throughout our entire everything we do. If you want to subscribe, I think right here, I've been told right here, there's a button. No button in front of me, but there's a button up here somewhere. Could be over here. Could be over here. Somewhere up here, there's a button. Subscribe so you follow this, follow the YouTube channel. And go to getliberty.org and subscribe to the email. It's so important that we're able to talk to you on a daily basis on the issues that matter. It's so important that you're able to see different things that are happening and different perspectives than you're reading anywhere else. We spend a lot of time, energy, and effort and cost to be able to produce real articles that are unique, videos that are unique, statements that are in real time and important on issues that matter, so that you have a baseline and are better informed what's going on. Our articles, we always attempt to put actual links when we're on different facts in the articles, because we don't just want you to take our word for it. We want you to be able to be Bereans, and it's a biblical reference, to be people who are able to check our work, take a look at it, read the source material yourself, have it at your fingertips so you can make your own decision. So you're not relying on us being interpreters. We're happy to be interpreters, but we want you to know that you will always be able to, as we put those links in, because we want you to be able to check us, because it both keeps us honest, but also it allows you to be better informed if you should choose to dive deeper. And so those are some of the things we're trying to do, is empower you and enable you, and then engage you. And in doing those things, it just makes for a better army in the fight for freedom. And we just appreciate all you do. This is Rick Manning. I'm President of Americans for Limited Government. I just want to say thank you for tuning in.